Okay, kia ora. Before we dive in today, let me start with a bit of a pop quiz. And this one, good news, is not graded. No one fails. It's a bit like NZQA. Sorry, this is probably a bit too early. Anyway, first question up here on the screen. And you probably have to move around a little bit. So first, do you have a colleague at work, or are you part of a club or team of any kind? If so, if you can stand up, which is probably like most of you, right? There we go. Okay, you can grab a seat. Next question, like I said, really easy. Next one, do you live with someone or next to someone? Stand up if that's correct. Do you have like any neighbor or anybody in your house? Okay, some of you must live in like Timbuktu or something. But okay, third question, you can sit down. Next question, do you have at least one family member, whether they're living with you or not? Could be anywhere in the world, but you have a family member. Okay, grab a seat. And finally, have you interacted with another person in the last week, a cashier, a neighbor, someone online, or anyone at all? If so, stand up. So you can grab a seat. So give yourselves a hand. You all kind of won. Obviously, all of you did stand or probably should have stood at one of those questions because here's the thing, all of us are in relationships, in a series of relationships. That's the point. Every single person here, whether you're 18 or 80, whether you're like an introvert or an extrovert, whether you're single or married, a whole range of relationships we have. When you think about flatmates and neighbors and family members and teammates, the barista who knows your coffee order when you walk in, the barista who doesn't ever seem to know your coffee order when you walk in like every single day, all these like series of relationships that we have. Our relationships are unavoidable. And what's more, if you've been like following Jesus for like decades, or whether you're new here today and you're still like trying to figure out the whole thing, whether you see yourself as like deeply spiritual, or whether you're still like, completely secular in your framework as you try to explore faith, all of us are in this boat together because we all have a series of relationships. And here's the thing. Though we are in a series of relationships, though all of us have lots of experience in relationships, we all find relationships, what's the word? Complicated. It's just hard at times, isn't it? They can be the source of our greatest joy and the source of our greatest pain, often in the same week. Often in the same conversation, right? And that's just because conflict arises. Communication gets misunderstood, and we fight or we flee. It's the universal experience when it comes to all relationships. So beginning today, we're in this series called Relation Slips, because let's face it, we all slip in relationships, and so this series is designed to strengthen our relationships. Now, some of you, when you kind of hear this series, you're kind of like leaning in and going, I feel great, I need this, because you're very well aware that you have a long way to go. You could all do with some like extra skills in relationships. I'm kind of the first one to acknowledge that for myself. And so you're like looking forward to this. And in fact, you might even be aware that there's a lot of books and research around this at the moment. But the last 5 years, relationship health just seems to be like declining. Each month after month after month, more loneliness has been experienced, more anxiety. We don't know how to talk to each other anymore. And this isn't just like intimate relationships. It's just like right across the board when trust is at an all-time low across our society. So we could all do with this, right? Some of you, though, if you've been part of our church for a while, you might be going, topical series. Great. As if that's a bad thing or a second-rate thing. But you see, here's the thing. God cares deeply about relationships. He didn't design for us to be in isolation. He created us for connection. And God wants us to experience the very best of relationships with each other, whether that's a spouse or a family member or a colleague or somebody here in your small group or a church or wherever it is. And not only does he want to help you in your relationships, but he wants you to help other people experience healthy relationships. And so if we can all develop some skills in that space, I think we're actually partnering with God to renew people and places all around us, our mission. So today I want to talk about what I believe is the core problem underlying all or most relationship struggles. And before I tell you what it is, let me ask you another question. You don't have to stand for this one and put your hand up or anything, but how many of you have been frustrated with somebody this week? Yeah, some of you, a lot of nods going around. And I would imagine everybody here in this room can think of at least somebody, some person that has frustrated you in some way. It might be a spouse. You don't have to turn to them or nudge them or elbow them if you're sitting next to that person. It could be a child, it could be a parent, it could be a distant relative, it could be a colleague, team member, church member, pastor, who knows? It could be a whole range of people, and they've just frustrated you in some way. And if you've kind of experienced that, which I imagine everyone here online and here in the room has experienced it, I would also bet that frustration probably caught you off guard. That suddenly you found yourself expecting something you weren't expecting to feel in that moment. And here's what might be hard for you to hear about that situation. What if I told you the problem isn't necessarily them? What if the real issue isn't that your spouse is inconsiderate and never listens? What if the real issue isn't that your kids are ungrateful or your co-worker's lazy? But what if the problem is something you're carrying around that you don't even know that you carry around? And what if the frustration actually says something more about you than it does them? Now, I know some of you are thinking at this point, JD, you have no idea. You've never met my spouse. You've never met my kids. You don't know the work environment I'm in. You don't work with these people. But just hang with me for a moment, because I would say the core problem in our relationships is what we're going to talk about today. And so sometimes people talk about the lack of communication, and so we need to get better at communication. We're going to talk about that in our series. Sometimes we talk about conflict and the need for better conflict resolution. We're going to talk about that in our series too. But what I'm learning myself through what I experience is there's something underneath all of this that comes down to one word that we seldom name or identify, and it's expectations. Can you say that with me? Expectations. And what I'm learning is that the failure to check your expectations will ultimately lead to a wreck in your relationships. See, all of us set out in life. It's like we have a whole set of dreams. It's like we're kind of born with all of these dreams, and we grow up and we have all these dreams. And so let me think about this box of life dreams, our box of dreams. And all of us will have different dreams, but you kind of just work with me for a moment to kind of just reflect on what some of those dreams might be. So I imagine there's dreams, for instance, around family. So you might have these kind of moments when you want to have those moments you capture on film, and you get the photo and you have the frame and you put that in your office or around the house, because you have these dreams of what it is to have these family moments. Or it might be friends that you want to think about, friends who are going to celebrate those milestone moments with you, and they're going to be there, and all of those high moments of joy. They're also going to be there for you and the moments of grief and pain, and that's what we want from our friends. And then there's also our work dreams that we have, that we're going to be in a culture, and everybody's going to be on the same page, and we're all going to have purpose and setting out as meaning, and we're going to have a boss or a team that gives us that monthly month of the employee of the month award, or perhaps there's a team trophy that you kind of win in that team culture. Or it might be a series of dreams around romance, that you want to find someone that you can love and that will love you. There's a whole lot of dreams that all go into this box. And here's what I've discovered, though. Somewhere along the way, this box of dreams starts to become a box of expectations. So somehow, for some reason, the dreams start to turn into expectations. And when that happens, suddenly the box starts to feel quite heavy. And we carry this kind of heavy burden of expectations all around into every single relationship we have. And so the dreams of family start to become expectations. And so we start to remember, I was with the whole family. Remember, we went out to like Sylvia Park 6 months, 5 days, and 3 hours ago, and I pointed to that thing in the store, and I told you how much I liked it. And we assume the family will know, that means I need to get that for you for your birthday when you celebrate. And we have an expectation. It's a dream of family. It starts to become an expectation that we place on other people. Or that dream of family starts to become this expectation that they will remember our birthday. They will know our birthday. They'll know how important that birthday is to us, and they'll celebrate in exactly the way that we want it to be celebrated. We have an expectation. Or we expect them to know exactly what we're feeling and facing in life and be able to come around and support us in that moment, even though they've never experienced it before. Or that they even know what we're feeling, even though we've never articulated it to them before. We just have this expectation that friends will, we assume that they know what we're going through. And then when it comes to teen culture, we expect that if you have a boss, that they'll remember you and they'll appreciate you and they'll do it like financially, and they won't give you like some cheap trophy for your team or some cheap certificate, but they'll actually reward you financially. Or if you have staff, that they'll kind of listen to you and have like all these dreams turn into expectations. And of course, when it comes to romance, we have expectations too. And so we often expect to find Ms. Right and Mr. Right, and we expect them to look a particular way, and we expect them to stay looking a particular way. And so our dreams that we might have suddenly become expectations. Are you with me? Anyone kind of relate to any of this at all? So again, some of these dreams might be healthy. Some of them might be realistic. Of course, some of them might be completely unrealistic along the way too. But we have these dreams, and this is what tends to happen. In our box of expectations, we place a lid, and then we assume, as we carry our box of expectations that are actually quite heavy, and we bring them into like all of our relationships, we assume that everyone around us, whether it's our spouse, our children, our parents, our friends, our colleagues, church members, whoever, they know what's in our box. Even though sometimes we don't even know what's in our box. But we have these assumptions and these expectations, and they're all on other people, even though we have a lid on them. And even though it's unseen, it's invisible. And all of that's bottled up. Now, here's the other thing. As you have your own box of expectations, guess what? They also have a box of dreams that have also turned into a box of expectations. And so if you're married, your spouse has expectations of you. It might be expectations of what you will spend your money with or what you won't spend your money on. They have expectations of what you will look like and what you will look like one day. Expectations about the jobs you will do or shouldn't do. A whole bunch of expectations. In a family, your family has expectations on you, the way you should turn up and should just like know what's going on. And you'll always like call your parent when they're like aging, like every hour of the day or every week or whatever it is. There's like unspoken expectations that come through. Your boss has expectations on you. It might be, are you going to work in the office, or are you working from home? Are you going to be available after hours? Or a whole lot of expectations that person might have of you, whether it's good or bad. And if you, of your colleagues, you have expectations on whether they'll be available to help you. When they finish their job, that they'll check in with you. Expectations on friends who will be there and say the right things. A whole bunch of expectations. So guess what happens when the box of expectations that you carry around and the box of expectations that they carry around start to come together, or better, collide with each other? See, welcome to the world of relation slips, where suddenly our dreams become demands, where the hopes we have become a whole series of hurts we now have, where these expectations that you have and that I have collide and slip out into this very messy world. And of course, in their box, the lid is also on, so you never know what's in their list of expectations. They never know what's in yours, and it all just becomes chaotic. So friends, this is exactly why we need to talk about expectations. to check our expectations before they wreck our relationships. One of the books in the Bible is called Proverbs. It's found in the kind of Old Testament, about halfway into our Bibles. And Proverbs is kind of like, it's 31 chapters, and each chapter is just like all these like pithy, wise statements about how life usually works. And Māori would call them like whakatoki, these wise, pithy statements. And so we come to like Proverbs chapter 13, verse 12. And this is what the writer of Proverbs has to say about human nature, what we're all learning and trying to figure out today. He says this: hope deferred or dreams delayed makes the heart sick, but a dream fulfilled is a tree of life. Now, this isn't just ancient wisdom. This is really a diagnosis of what's happening across the room right now in our various relationships. Notice he doesn't say hope destroyed. He says hopes or dreams delayed, postponed, unmet. And what it tends to happen when those dreams go unfulfilled, it makes our hearts sick. The Hebrew there means like weakened or crushed. It's that sinking feeling you get in your chest when somebody doesn't respond the way you expected. That they didn't turn up for your birthday, they don't even remember your birthday, that they sent you a card but didn't have like the words you wanted, or you thought you told them about what you, and they didn't get it for you, and you feel this frustration where the kids don't appreciate the sacrifices you made, the frustration when your colleagues aren't pulling their weight. See, here's what's fascinating to me, that most of us don't even know what's in our box. It's almost like it's just unconscious. And so we're walking around with all these like invisible longings, these unspoken hopes and dreams, how people should treat us, and then our expectations go unmet and our hearts get sickened. And the writer of Proverbs is wanting us to understand this pattern, that hope deferred leads to heart sickness, one of the most destructive forces in our relationships. And honestly, as a pastor, I see this play out in relationships every day, in the workplace, in small groups, in family life, and wherever it is, in marriages. That there's a series of expectations people have, and they clash with each other, and suddenly we just slip into this mess. And there's hurt, and there's bitterness, and there's heartbrokenness. But notice how the author of the proverb doesn't end with the sickness, the problem. He talks about what can be. So he goes on, gives us hope. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a dream fulfilled or expectations delivered is a tree of life. Now, if you're not familiar with the Bible, that phrase tree of life might be kind of new for you, but you go right back to the very first book of the Bible, Genesis. In the first couple of chapters, we see how God, the Creator, plants this garden called Eden, and he places the very first people, Adam and Eve, places them in the garden. And right in the center of that garden is this tree of life. And when they ate from that tree, and easy access, free access, it would provide eternal life and healthy, flourishing relationships with God, with each other that would never finish, and they'd always be flourishing and thriving. But of course, when sin entered the world, all of those relationships began to be broken. And so ever since then, we have been longing for beauty, but tend to experience more brokenness in our relationship with God and with each other and our families and our workplaces, all of that. So we long for health, but we long for what we've lost, but we tend to experience the conflict and the disappointment, and these dreams we have become expectations, and all gets problematic, and they all crash up against each other. But here's what the writer of Proverbs is highlighting. When we can actually handle our expectations and communicate our expectations, when those dreams can actually turn into reality, or we become realistic about what those dreams/expectations are, we start to actually get a taste of that original design. That our relationships, whatever form of relationship we're talking about, can actually start to be like a tree of life. Something that's life-giving, that's sustaining, that brings joy and peace and hope, all the things that we want. So, of course, the question for us today is, well, how do we go from here to here? How do we go from carrying this box of expectations that get so heavy to actually experiencing a tree of life in our relationships with each other? And to help with that, I think we first need to understand the nature of unhealthy expectations. And what I'm finding incredibly helpful in my own life is some work that Pete Scazzero did on emotionally healthy relationships. And through their work, they identified 4 areas where expectations get really unhealthy. And just to sit with this for a bit, I think is going to be really helpful. So problem 1 is when your expectation is unconscious. Many times we have the lid on, it's unconscious to us. We don't even realize we have an expectation on our spouse or our parent or our children or our colleague or our boss or whoever it is. And we're not aware of it until it gets crushed. And then our heart gets kind of sick and we get bitter. He says problem number 2 is your expectations unrealistic. So you start to expect your teenager to have the emotional maturity of a 30-year-old, even though they're going through a whole lot of emotional roller coasters. Or we kind of expect a new employee to have all the knowledge they need or work at the same pace as somebody who's been there like 5 years or 10 years. It's just unrealistic. Or you expect your single friend to understand the complexities of married life or parenting, even though they've never experienced it before. Or you expect somebody to understand what it is that you're feeling, even though they've never gone through what it is that you've gone through or the anxieties you've gone through, or you've perhaps even told them about it, which leads to the third one. Problem 3, your expectation is unspoken. That you've never actually communicated your expectation to that other person. Instead, you assume that they know what's on your mind, and because it's common sense to you. But what I'm discovering is that what's common sense to me is not necessarily common sense to somebody else. So I make these like assumptions about something and just assume, well, they should know. Because I pointed it out and I said, I like that thing in the store 6 months, 5 days, 3 hours ago. They should know that. But what's common sense, it's not clear. It hasn't been. And then the fourth one, your expectation is unagreed upon. That even though you went through the process and it was conscious and it was spoken and, it was realistic, they never actually agreed to it. So you said to your colleague at work, you let them know, I'm under huge stress at the moment, I could do with some help. And you assume that, well, it's a clear expectation. You kind of articulated you need some help, but they never said to you, yes, I can help you, and I'll meet that deadline by 5 o'clock on Friday. Because you might not understand what it is that they have on too, that they actually can't meet and help you right now, and so they never agreed to it. You might even be a boss kind of asking, just assuming that if you kind of like let your staff know, this meeting's on at 3 o'clock, that they've agreed. If they haven't agreed to it, it's like the expectation's not there unless you agree on something together. See, I wonder how much of us have this frustration with our spouse, a child, a friend, a colleague, even God himself, because we're waiting to come through on a promise that none of them actually made. And Pete Scazzero says, actually, the reason we feel this disappointment and hurt and difficulty in our relationships all come down to these 4 faulty expectations. They're unconscious, they're unrealistic, they're unspoken, and they're unagreed upon. And when any of our expectations fall into any or all of those categories, we will experience what the writer here says is heart sickness. But thankfully, it doesn't have to be that way. The writer again continues and flips it over to the other side. A dream fulfilled is a tree of life. So I've got 3 C's that I want us to work on together over these weeks ahead that I think move us towards experiencing more of those like tree of life moments. Here's the first C. Catch it. And there's a phrase here. Your disappointment is information about your expectations. I want you to think of yourself as like a detective. That when you start to feel something from that relationship, whether it's at work or home, whatever it is, you actually pay attention to what you're feeling. And before you dart to, why don't they kind of understand? Why are they doing this to me? You actually just ask yourself the question, what expectation of mine just got violated? Because it's likely, you might not even realize what's going on, but there's likely something in your lidded, invisible box. And it's a dream that turned into an expectation, and you just need to wrestle with that for a bit. And so you might want to think of it like you've got the dashboard on your car, and those warning lights that come on. Those feelings you have, whether it's disappointment, frustration, whatever it is you're feeling, think about them as like a warning light. And you pay attention to them and go, okay, what is it saying about me at the moment? Before you think about them, what is it saying about me? And what is it saying about perhaps the expectations I have that I probably have never articulated before? So you catch it, and you become a detective of your own feelings. And then you move from catch it to second one is check it. And you just ask yourself, is this realistic and is this real? So, is this actually reasonable of this other person, these expectations I have of them, given how old they are or given like what's going on in their life right now? Do my colleagues have the resources and the time to actually help? Are my expectations of this person actually realistic? What evidence do I actually have that they can even meet or even in the past have met this expectation? Now, part of checking is actually checking your own assumptions. See, many times we have like these assumptions that go in our minds, right? It's almost like we have like a court of law going on about those other people, and we start thinking, she probably thinks I'm incompetent, or he doesn't think that I care about him, or, they're judging me, and we kind of go through all these things in our minds, and they may be real, but many times they're not real. And it kind of reminds me of one of the 10 Commandments. In the Old Testament, God gives us this moral framework to his people about the way life works better when we kind of follow those. But the ninth one in the 10 Commandments says this: you must not testify falsely against your neighbor. Now, many times, rightly, we apply that to like a court of law that you should witness and tell the truth about what you saw. I think it's also true about what goes in our minds about that other person. So often we have like this testimony going on about those other people, and we're telling ourselves what they're feeling or what they're thinking. We don't actually know. We're making these assumptions. And many times what I've found is those assumptions are incorrect and unfair, and we've never actually taken the time to check. So in many ways, it's like a breach of that ninth commandment, because we're crafting this narrative about that person that's not fair, it's not realistic, it's not true, but we live life as if it was true. And it actually breaks down these relationships. So imagine if we could actually have the courage to actually move towards a kind of a proactive way of living, and we ask permission to go, hey, could I check an assumption that I have? I wonder if you might be thinking, fill in the blank, is that correct? Now, I wonder if you are thinking that's actually my job. Is that correct? And you start to just check those assumptions, and you actually can start to talk about things. Many times, it might be exactly what they're thinking, and that leads to a different dialogue, which we'll come to in a moment. But many times, it's not what they're thinking or feeling, and you actually need to let them off the hook for the sake of a healthy relationship. Imagine if we all did this. I think just in that moment alone, we will start to experience a lot more healthy, true, genuine relationships with each other. The final part, we catch it, we check it, and then finally we clarify. We actually have the conversation. So instead of keeping your expectations locked with the lid in the box and nobody sees it, including yourself, you start to actually clarify the expectations that you have. So you start to enter into some conversations like, can we actually talk about what we both expect in this situation? And you talk about it. I'm realizing I was expecting you to do fill in the blank. Is that reasonable for me to expect that from you? I like to clarify an expectation I have of you. Is that fair? And it's like you're taking the lid off that box and you're sharing your dreams, you're sharing your expectations, and you're going through them. And instead of demanding that somebody meets your expectations, you're inviting them into a conversation, and you're asking if your expectations are fair and reasonable, and you're giving them the opportunity to actually say yes or no, or can actually we alter that a little bit and kind of reframe and reset those expectations, because I can't deliver on that, but I could do X, Y, Z. And you start to move towards experiencing those tree of life moments. Now, oftentimes, as we would all have experienced, we have expectations placed upon us that we have never agreed to. So what do we do? Well, I've been sitting with a story in the life of Jesus lately about how Jesus had all these expectations placed upon him. And many times those expectations were healthy and they weren't bad, but they weren't expectations that Jesus himself had agreed to. He had a very different way of thinking. So Mark, in Mark's Gospel, one of the biographies that was written about Jesus from one of his early followers, Mark tells a story in Mark chapter 1. He says this: before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up, went out to an isolated place to pray, something Jesus often did. Later, Simon, one of the early followers of Jesus, and the others went out to find him. When they found him, they said, "Everyone is looking for you." Excuse me. So kind of imagine the scene. This is like a day after Jesus has been out, like he's been teaching all day, he's been healing lots of people, and so all of the rest of the town have heard about that. They're like all in. They want Jesus to teach them, to heal them. They're bringing like lots of sick people to him. And you can hear the insinuation here, the unspoken expectation, very subtle. Everyone is looking for you. Which means what? Jesus, what are you doing out here? You know, kind of get busy. Let's get back in here. Like, this is a prime opportunity. Jesus, like crowds of people, they want you. They want to hear your teaching. They need some help. So rather than get away and have, your self-time praying, come along and get busy with real people and real needs. It's an expectation that they have of Jesus. It's not an unhealthy expectation, but it's not one he agrees with. So he replies, well, actually, we must go to the other towns as well, and I'll preach to them too. This is why I came. And so he traveled to the other regions of Galilee. So Jesus never actually went into the town where there was this particular need and responded to all their expectations, because no one, even the ultimate Messiah, never had a Messiah complex. He never stepped in and met all the needs. He never fulfilled all the expectations people had. But instead, he gave a bigger picture and communicated, actually, the big reason I am here is so much bigger than what you can imagine. And so he went ahead with his mission. And again, if you're in the town that day, you'd probably be a bit disappointed. But Jesus had never agreed to the expectations that they might have had on Jesus. So here's what I'm learning. Stepping into healthy relationships means owning up to the unhealthy expectations that are often in our box. So think about those 4 traits again up here on the screen. Those 4 unhealthy expectations, they're unconscious, unrealistic, unspoken, unagreed upon. So we want to flip those around the other way to actually be the opposite. To be, next slide, conscious, realistic, or you can think about the opposites, conscious, realistic, unspoken, and agreed upon. That's what a healthy framework going forward needs to look like. So instead of silently building up resentment when somebody doesn't meet your expectation, you say something like, hey, I'm realizing I had an expectation that I have probably never even communicated to you and that you never agreed upon. I was hoping that you share your expectation. Is that something you're willing to consider? I imagine if all of us had that kind of healthy dialogue with our spouses, with our children, with our parents, with our friends around us, with our colleagues, with our boss, with our teams that we lead, we start to move again towards health in our relationships. So when you're willing to go through this process, you start to move from the Proverbs warning to the Proverbs promise. And we stop experiencing the hope deferred, which leads to heart sickness, and we start creating dreams fulfilled, which becomes trees of life in our relationships. So this week, I've got some homework for you. At some stage this week, maybe even this afternoon, maybe even on your way home, you are going to have a clash of expectations. It might happen in the car, it might happen in home, it might happen in your workplace this week. And when you do, when you face that disappointment, here's what I want you to do. I want you, rather than move into the relation slips, I want you to start to strengthen those relationships by going through these 3 C's. So first of all, catch it. So again, become a detective on your own emotions, because your disappointment is information about your expectation. So rather than point the finger at them, start to actually own up and self-reflect and go, what expectation of mine likely just got violated? And then secondly, you check it. I guess against those kind of 4 traits. Is it conscious, realistic, spoken, and agreed upon? If it's not, what do you need to do about that? And then finally, clarify it. You have the conversation. Now notice I said conversation, not confrontation. They're very different things. It's when you step in and you say something like, I realize I had an expectation that I have never communicated. Can we talk about this? And are there any expectations that you have of me that we need to talk about right now too. Because here's what I'm learning. The people who frustrate you the most, they're not actually trying to hurt you. They're not out there just trying to push those buttons. They're just living their lives trying to carry a box of heavy dreams that have become expectations, and they're like clashing and colliding with yours. And they want to experience a tree of life in their relationships too. So I think what we can all do is simply be proactive to check your expectations before they wreck your relationships. That we would say, we're not going to carry these invisible boxes of unclear, unspoken, unagreed upon expectations around any longer. But we're actually going to enter into those conversations and move away from our hearts getting sick from deferred dreams to starting to move towards those relationships that are like trees of life. Let's pray together. Father, thank you that when we talk to you, we're actually talking to one who knows all about relationships. Because Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, for eternity, you've dwelt in this beautiful, life-giving relationship. And that's what you want us to experience too. And so over the course of these next few hours and days and weeks, would you help us to grow, to experience more of those flourishing, life-giving, joy-giving, peace-dwelling relationships. The ones you've created, the ones you want us to experience. And help us to move away from the messes and mishaps and misunderstandings. Forgive us for the times that we continue to fail and slip. And by your Spirit, would you help us to move towards what's good and healthy and right. In Jesus' name, we all said, amen.